Welcome back to the Comic Blast podcast. This is part 2 of our hype building up to Spider-Man Miles Morales. In this episode, we are going to get into the explosion of hype that has surrounded the character of Miles Morales as the new and growing more famous each day Spider-Man. I am Grayson, one of your hosts. Along with me is Keenan once again. Keenan, what is up?
What's happening? Definitely hyped for Spider-Man Miles Morales. Hopefully you guys listened to the first episode that we dropped yesterday. We revisited Spider-Man PS4. That was fun. But now we're really getting into the good stuff because we're talking Miles Morales. He is growing in popularity. He's getting his own movies, animated. He's getting his own game. Still really cool. And hopefully we see him in live action one day. But we're going to talk all about Miles Morales. Really pumped for it.
Yeah. So I kind of want to start off by just saying, like, Miles has really... Okay, actually, let me backtrack a little bit more. So when Miles was created in, like, 2011, so he's been almost around for, like, 10 years.
Yeah.
For people who don't know, his genesis came from the Ultimate Comics, which is my favorite comic run of Spider-Man. It's what I grew up with.
Yeah.
It was one of the best, like, modern interpretations of Spider-Man, at the time at least. It ran for like 10 years, starting in like the early 2000s. Stan Lee loved it. It was written by Brian Michael Bendis, who is a very famous comic book writer, and then drawn by Mark Bagley, who is one of my favorite Spider-Man artists as well. And so basically what happened is I remember being like 10 or 11, and I wasn't in a huge Spider-Man phase, but it still was like, he was a big hero to me. And I remember when they killed Spider-Man, when like the death of Spider-Man happened, and I was like, oh my gosh, they killed Spider-Man. That's insane. Like, it was very much that whole thing of like the death of Superman all over again. And I was like, it was like crazy. It wasn't like big headlines and stuff. And I was like, they killed Spider-Man. I can't believe it. And my dad's like, well, it's just in the Ultimate Comics. And I was like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, this new Spider-Man comes along, and I remember my dad being like, oh yeah, there's like this new Spider-Man. He's like this black Hispanic Spider-Man. And I was like, what? I was like, that's kind of weird. And I'm not going to lie, I was a little mad at it. Not because of that aspect, but I was mad because I'm like, they just killed Spider-Man and then just like replaced him with this new kid.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of annoying.
Dude, I'm so happy you said that. Because I agree 100%.
Yeah, it was like, I mean, Peter Parker has been Spider-Man since the 60s. So naturally you're like, what?
They took my boy
Well,
Peter.
I didn't know much about the character. Like, and so, you know, I didn't have much hate actually for him, but just the whole idea of them like doing that. And I was like, all right, whatever. Well, as time kind of went on, like, you know, he started becoming a more popular character, but like and I think this is where he became the most popular, right?
Yeah.
So there was the push when they rebooted Spider-Man going into The Amazing Spider-Man, and there was that huge push for Donald Glover to play Spider-Man.
I remember that.
Do you remember that? Yeah.
That's huge.
And so this was like 2012. There was like, I remember there was literally like this hashtag, this slogan. He talks about it in one of his comedy shows. You can go check it out.
That was back when Childish Gambino was still a rapper.
Yeah, that was the early days of Childish Gambino.
Yeah, it was like right before like because of the internet.
That's true. And so also he's on Community and stuff. So like people liked him because they're like, oh, he's dorky. He's like this cool. He's dorky, but he's cool. You know. And so there was this whole like movement for Donald for Spider-Man. They wanted him to be Spider-Man in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, and I think even Brian Michael Bendis was behind it. Yeah. Like he was like, yeah, let's do it. And I don't know if they wanted him to be Miles or if they wanted him to be Peter, but there was a huge movement for that. And so it really brought Miles into the limelight because it's like, okay, yeah, we do have like this cool kind of dorky, not like dorky in the traditional sense, but like dorky and like yeah, exactly. He's just kind of like, he's kind of a little bit of a goofball, but he's cool.
That's it.
You know, he's got that swagger to him, which we see in what we're going to get into in a second with Spider-Verse and now Miles Morales coming out. And so that was a big thing. And then, lo and behold, Donald Glover did play Miles Morales Spider-Man in the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon series. He voiced him. And I remember being like, whoa, that's so cool that they actually did that. And Donald Glover is like in his 30s.
Yeah.
He's a like late 30s, and so obviously he's not playing a 15-year-old by any stretch of the imagination. But still, the concept was cool, and so after that, people were like, "Oh wow!" Like they actually got behind it. Like Donald Glover, Childish Gambino, played Miles Morales. Like, and so then Miles started to come more and more into the spotlight, and especially when they started doing these alternate versions of Marvel superheroes. Not alternate versions, but new versions.
Yeah.
Like I think it was the slogan was all new all Marvel or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that was when they did Jane Foster Thor, and they did Kamala Khan Miss Marvel. They did Sam Wilson Captain America. I think they had a new guy as Hulk, who was like in college, like an Asian guy. I can't remember. I think it was like Ryan Choi or something, but I could be that's maybe a different character. Regardless, and they also had I think it was like Riri Williams as Ironheart, who was like a female black Iron Man. So it was kind of like definitely a big push for diversity. Some of those characters hit, some of those characters didn't.
I think most were misses.
I think the two biggest ones for sure were
Thor.
Were definitely Miles and Kamala Khan.
Oh,
and
you think so?
Thor, obviously. Well, yeah,
I think Thor
definitely
was a little bit mixed with Jane Foster, because like the problem with like them redoing basically these Marvel characters is that a lot of them felt like the same exact characters with like you're kind of reskinning them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like there really was nothing to differentiate the two, like the original and the new one,
right?
Other than we just wanted to get a new face in place.
Yeah.
Where you have somebody like Miles who is different than Peter Parker. Also, they're adding to his power set, which was really cool as well. He's got brand new powers. And I think, obviously, of course, Spider-Man being such a huge character helped too, because probably one of the most popular superheroes of all time. But I think people really were able to gravitate towards Miles Morales. Going back to what you said, though, I was very hesitant on the whole idea of Miles Morales when I first heard about it. Because of that reason, I'm like, oh my God, they're just like, they're going to try to replace Peter Parker. And Peter Parker is the Spider-Man that I've always known growing up. So it's just like very strange to me, and it was hard to accept Miles Morales. And I'll be honest, it wasn't until pretty recently that I kind of had become attached to Miles Morales. Probably, it's sad to say, but it probably wasn't until Spider-Verse where I fully embraced Miles Morales as Spider-Man.
Right.
But I'm just being honest, that's just my opinion. And now I just love him as a character. And, I kind of fit in with like the mainstream crowd where like this character's blown up. And I don't want to say he's overtaking Peter Parker, but this version of Spider-Man is resonating with the kids of
so
today.
Many people.
It's it's like Spider-Man for this generation in particular, where people are just really gravitating towards this character. I can't get my brother to sit down and watch a Spider-Man movie or a cartoon for anything, but if I put in Spider-Verse, he will sit there and he will not move. He will finish that movie, which I love. It's so cool.
So much.
Yeah, it's so cool to see. And I don't necessarily think it has to do with doesn't have anything to do with what he looks like. I think he just really enjoys the character. Which is, really cool to see as well. But
yeah. Obviously, like for people who know, like, I'm always going to relate with Peter Parker because he looks like me and acts like me and basically was me growing up.
Sure.
And was for so many other people. It wasn't an exclusive thing, and that's kind of what Stan Lee was going for. And so I think Brian Michael Bendis, when he created Miles Morales, was like, well, not every kid is a
nerd,
dorky, like a dorky nerd with like glasses and brown hair and like lives with his aunt and uncle or whatever, like, or whatever aspects you want to take from that. Like, some actually have like normal lives and like they still have their own issues too. Yeah. It's not like I think we tend to think that only the outcasts and the dorks like have hard things going on in their lives, and it's like Miles is a pretty like we said, like a pretty cool guy.
Yeah.
But he has his own issues too. Like, I mean, he's he's young, he's mixed, he's like his passions involve like mixing and recording. He loves like his shoe collection and his music, but his dad's a cop and kind of has like a contentious relationship with his dad sometimes because of that. Like he loves his uncle, who ends up actually being like a famous bank robber. So there's a lot of cool like connections there, and that like it's other people can relate to. I think Spider-Verse absolutely set Miles on the map for the mainstream audience.
Yeah.
I think I want to say around like 2014 or 2015 is when he started becoming a really big character with comic book audiences, because they were like he was getting that time and effort put into his character, with these crossover events and stuff like that. But when Spider-Verse came out, I mean, yeah, I have to agree. Like that's when I was like, yeah, I love Miles. Like he's got such a cool power set. Like he's not just a Peter Parker clone, like many people thought he was. He has his own issues, his own insecurities, his own strengths. Like while he may share some similarities with Peter, and that's what makes them connect. He's not the same guy.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like having those personality traits makes him just like really cool and fun to like watch. And I think Insomniac understands that with their game, is that, I think these hashtags, these lines identify so much with the characters. Peter Parker for Spider-Man PS4 was hashtag be greater, and I loved that. I was like, literally, it's being like, be the better person, be the greater person. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
But then we get with Miles, we get be greater, followed up with that by be yourself.
Yep.
And that is so cool too, because it's like, I think Miles, was like, Peter was the example of, you can be a better person in all scenarios, even when it's really hard for you. Miles is like, you can be you're true to yourself and still be awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's
and still be
your own Spider-Man
version.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like you.
And we learned that lesson from Spider-Verse. Again, he's just like,
absolutely.
He's like, don't do what I did. Like, be your own Spider-Man.
Yeah. It's a valuable
and that's
lesson.
kind of what yeah, exactly. And it's what Miles embraces. And that's what I just love so much about the character. And it's crazy that he's like become so popular less than 10 years,
It's like, it seems like a long time, but it's not in terms of like comic book characters, because we are really, in today's day and age, we're really struggling to find new characters to latch on to in comic books. Like there's been attempts, DC and Marvel both, where they try to create new characters that people, will hopefully gravitate towards. And it's really hasn't done well for quite some time. I think, honestly, Miles Morales might be the most recent character that's relatively new and people have embraced fully.
Yeah.
And
I want to say like 10% of the characters are like, they get picked up.
yeah, it's tough because like as a comic book community, we love these particular characters and we just want to continue to see those characters. And it's tough to really fall in love with new ones. But with Miles, it's so different because it's still, the reason I loved Spider-Man, when I was a kid was because I thought his powers were cool. I was like, oh God, I want to climb up walls and I want to swing from building to building. And, as a kid, I had this big infatuation with New York City because when I was probably, 2, 3, 4, my dad would take us to New York City, every couple weeks. And I just love it. I love it there. And just getting to see Spider-Man swinging through buildings in New York, I was like, God, I want to be there and I want to be able to do that. And, that was why I loved that character so much when I was younger, and it wasn't until I got older and started to understand, the impact that the character really would have on my life later on down the line. But so you're essentially still getting those Spider-Man powers, the things that like you wish you could do. But then you're looking at a brand new character in terms of like the tragedies that make Miles Morales, or the conflicts, or the relationships that he has with like family and friends are very different from the ones that Peter Parker has. It's not kind of rehashed or anything like that. He's just representing new conflicts and other things that people could potentially relate to. He still has his parents, but sometimes those relationships with your parents are fractured. And how many kids are going through that, as a teen, a young teen. Plenty of kids are going through stuff like that. So yeah, he's kind of representing new stories, new ideas, new relationships, while also maintaining those powers that we love to see and wish we had. And that's kind of what's so amazing about this interpretation of Spider-Man.
Yeah, and also like just to play off of it, like to continue what we said about Miles being cool. Dude, he's so cool. Like,
he's fresh.
I remember when the trailer coming out, like, first of all, Spider-Verse had an awesome soundtrack, like, all of this stuff. It was super hype. Miles, he has awesome shoes.
Jordan. Yeah.
He has awesome taste in music. He's got with, like, Kid Cudi and, like, Jaden Smith and stuff, which are, hey, we like those artists, and we're like, I mean, and I'm still a nerd, but I'm like, I like that music too. He has a sick suit, black and red.
Absolutely,
I'm down with it. I like black. I like red. Put them together, you got a really cool Spider-Man suit. And then he's also just got those cooler powers. Like, I'm sorry, Peter. Like, you can't be invisible, and you can't literally shoot lightning. Like, like. Miles has got you beat there.
He does.
And so like it's just having that kind of contrast definitely makes a huge difference. And I cannot wait to just like hop into Miles Morales and just like have some awesome like music to jam out to, and like just like vibe while beating dudes up.
Listen, so like I was thinking about this earlier today. I'm like, you and I in particular, we have like different ways that we can relate to each of those characters, Peter Parker and Miles Morales, because we're like,
right,
we're pretty nerdy dudes, and we make dad jokes, and we're kind of corny, and we have the struggles of a young adult, trying to pay bills and trying to balance all of these things in life. But also Miles Morales, he's also a cool dude, and I think we're both pretty cool dudes sometimes, and we like the same music and stuff. And to be honest, like if I was Spider-Man, I would definitely be wearing like some sneakers and a hoodie over my suit too, because it's so cool. So he's like, Peter Parker is the Spider-Man that we are, but Miles Morales is the Spider-Man we wish we could be, because he's just so dang cool.
And it's like, that's what I like about being like, oh yeah, I can like embrace myself. Like, I wear my Converse and everything. So if like I'm Spider-Man, I'd probably be wearing some Converse or something, and like, and whatnot. But yeah. And also Miles in the game has a cat. So like, come on, you can't really beat that.
He has a cat. He's got his own little thing where he's making beats, and he's like, dude, he's just such a cool guy. I mean, there's so many gameplay clips that are coming out, and just like little cinematics where he's just like totally vibing with Harlem, and just like he's that cool dude walking down the street, And even if he
does embrace the more friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Absolutely. And even if he isn't noticed by people, he's like, I don't care. Like the whole thing in Spider-Verse where like the kids are like, oh, your shoe's untied. And he's like, I know, it's a choice. Like. Yeah, just like, he doesn't care. He's like, I'm just being me, He's like,
that's a great quote, man. I didn't even think about that. That's really unappreciated.
It really is. Like, he's just like, I'm just doing, me, like it or not, And I think that's why like so many people like him. It's crazy though, because like, we're definitely gonna talk about more of Spider-Man Miles Morales, like the game coming out, but there's like some similarities between Into the Spider-Verse and this game coming out, where if you look at Into the Spider-Verse, you could tell he's cool because he's walking by his own school early on in the game. And everybody's just like, Miles, like, and he's just
Like, we miss you, stuff like that.
exactly. And then he's kind of like this fish out of water when he's going to this new school where it's just like more uptight and he's not necessarily able to like be himself. It's like it's like a prep school, I think, or a private school. It's an academy. So,
Yep.
and then it's kind of going to be that same sort of vibe with this new game coming out where I think he's transitioning from Midtown to Harlem in this game. So he's kind of got to find his place within this new city, this new neighborhood, and I think he's just trying to gain the respect of this neighborhood.
Yeah.
But regardless, my point is,
Yeah,
Miles Morales is cool.
Yeah. And he will continue to get cooler, especially with more sequels of Spider-Verse down the line and stuff. And hey, all I can say is thank you to Miles Morales for having my favorite song of all time, Sunflower. That song would not exist without Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and Miles, I salute you. With that being said, we're going to make it the end of this little second mini part of this episode. The next episode, we will be talking about our excitement overall for Miles Morales as the game, just kind of gushing about the gameplay and what the story will entail and all of that. So thank you all for listening. If you didn't check the one before this, please go do that, as it's kind of part of the whole series. You can follow me at Straits38 on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow Keenan at Keenan Creates on the same places. You can follow Comic Blast at Comic Blast _ on Twitter and Instagram also. And I'm going to shout out all of our patrons at patreon.com/comicblast. We have Jess, who is our sponsor and also a co-host, might I add, but yeah. I'm sure if you are a faithful listener, you already know that. We also have Jake, Sam, Diego, Caleb, Joseph, and Jacob, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Cool. I'm making it a habit to remember because, when it gets up into the 10s and 15s and 20s, I want to remember every single one of your names because I love you all so much. If you want to be the 8th or 9th patron, I don't know, it depends on when we get a new one, you can find us on patreon.com/comicblast. We would greatly appreciate it, as low as $1 a month, and it helps support us. Oh, man. What? Give me a quote here, Keenan. Give me a quote in the episode.
A quote?
Yeah, we gotta have a Miles quote. I already said Shazam.
Oh, a Miles quote? Oh, geez,
yeah.
Man. Anyone can wear the mask. You can wear the mask.
Love it. We'll see you next time.
I hope I got that right.
I think you did.